Here is a video that Ronson sent to me about game development. Why slopes are shockingly difficult for indie game devs. I watched like a minute of this just to see what sort of the deal was. But I don't know. I don't actually know what the full context is here. So I guess let's learn a little bit about how video games work, how game development works, because I am not a game developer. Also, this guy's doing stuff in Godot, so he also has the game. I think it's wish list on Steam. If you want to go support this guy, when that loads, I will send you the link. Here we go. Here you go. Here's his game, and if you like the game, if you like the video, go support that. I don't know why Steam's not loading, because me and streaming does not go too well together. Anyway, let's see why slopes are shockingly difficult for indie game developers.
I'm getting rid of every slope in my indie game, and honestly, if you're a
oh, Richie, this is a one for you, I guess. This game's not yet available on Steam. Well, yeah, you can wishlist it. I don't know why this is not loading. Like, I don't know why Steam's not loading for me, and I can't even click stop loading the page. I love Firefox. What a great browser. Anyway, now the video dies. I will turn uBlock off. Maybe uBlock is causing issues. Maybe.
I'm getting rid of every slope
we're good.
in my indie game.
Okay, we're alive.
Honestly, if you're a game dev, you should probably do the same thing. And I'll explain why. But first, a little context. I'm Kenneth, and I'm working on a 2D pixel art action platformer called Isadora's Edge.
This looks exactly like the kind of game I'd want to play.
Hopefully you're seeing some sick-ass B-roll of the game right now. It's a game sort of like Symphony of the Night and Hollow Knight and Mega Man X.
Oh, this is definitely my kind of game.
That sort of gameplay style. Based on the title, thumbnail, and intro of this video, you probably wouldn't have guessed it, but I love slopes. In video games, I love slopes. And I don't even really know why. I mean, look at this. Look at that subtle.
Yeah, I don't know why. I have no idea why. Reminds me of Old School Rayman. I fucking love Old School Rayman.
Change in elevation. The tasteful gradation of it. Oh my god, it even has perspective. But honestly, I don't really know why I love slopes so much. They just like tickle something in my brain. Something in my brain goes, hell yeah, when I'm on a slope. Maybe it's the fact that it like makes the gameplay more smooth since you can change your elevation without needing to jump. It might just be nostalgia because the first time I played Mega Man X and I could like dash up a slope, it felt sick as hell compared to the previous Mega Man games. So maybe it's just pure nostalgia that makes my brain tick.
I don't understand why you like slopes this much. You know what? Someone's gotta like slopes.
With the good dopamine when I am on a slope.
Yeah, fair enough, man.
Slopes.
Fair enough.
And honestly,
I respect
it was that love for slopes that kept them in my game for so long and made it really hard for me to let go of them.
He has a slope fetish. Let him be okay.
Issues
yeah, I can
with
see
having
that.
slopes in the game have far outweighed the benefits of having slopes in the game. And so I'm going to break down the 3 major issues with slopes so that you can decide for yourself if you think slopes are worth it.
Are we going to learn some math today?
1, physics, 2, art, and 3, level design.
Okay, we're definitely gonna learn some math today. Okay, get ready for some math, boys. Art, I don't know where this one's gonna go. Level design, I'm not sure either. But let's see what the math's about.
First, let's start with physics. Now, I could summarize this whole section by saying that game engines hate slopes. They just despise slopes.
Right.
It's a bit of an oversimplification, but honestly, it's not that far off. It honestly just adds.
I already know this is going to give me Vietnam flashbacks to my Trixel days. Well, if you have anything you want to add, feel free to add it.
Adds a lot of complexity to the physics engine. First, let's start really basic. The game has gravity, right? It just pulls the player towards the floor. This makes perfect sense when you're standing on a flat floor. You just get pulled into the flat floor. But once you're on a slope, obviously, issues start to arise. You can see Isadora is getting pulled down the slope.
Wouldn't the easiest way to solve that to be where your hitbox is touching the ground? Gets a lot harder in Layer Lock 2.5D. I've not done much game development, but I would imagine you would just determined based on where your hitbox is here, but I don't know.
You can't just stand on it. Now, this is actually not that big of a deal. Most modern game engines have some kind of support for it, and I'm using Godot for my game. So I can go in and turn on the features that snap the player to the floor so that when you're standing on the floor, and it can detect a slope as the floor. Once you're standing on the floor, you will not get pulled down. And so I can turn that on, and Isadora is stuck to the floor, no problem. However, now that she's stuck to the floor, she can't jump because the game engine is pulling her onto the floor. So that's okay. We can also fix that where if you try to enter the jump state, you turn off the snap.
Well, also, at least by this basic demo here,
can't jump because the game engine is pulling her onto the floor.
It's also like weirdly above the ground.
That's okay. We can also fix that where if you try to enter the jump state, you turn off the snapping to the slope. This does have a little bit of weirdness where you slide down a little bit more than you should when you transition from an aerial state into the grounded state on the slope, but that's fine. We can account for all of that. But then we have another issue. Player has a horizontal move speed. When you're moving on a flat floor, the horizontal move speed
I know where this is going to go. I've dealt with this one personally.
It is very consistent. That's how fast you're going. When you're going down a slope, you're also being pulled down by gravity, so you're moving faster. Similarly, you're moving slower when you go up. This is not good. But we can also account for this, where we can measure the normal vector of the slope and determine the angle that the slope is at. And then if you're moving up a slope, we can apply a boost that is equivalent to the offset from the angle of the slope. So we can account for that too. But now we have an issue with the enemies, where the enemies have all these same issues. But that's fine. We can apply all these same fixes. Enemies, they snap to floor so they can move up the slopes. If they're trying to go aerial, then we turn off the snapping so that they can actually jump.
Reminds me of how Minecraft used to let you run fast when you headbutted against a 2-block tall ceiling. Yes, I do remember this. I do definitely remember that. If floor angle greater than 30-degree horizontal, then add horizontal speed with mixed gravity, you'll have a nice slide.
We can apply the same offset so that they don't move faster down slopes and slower up slopes.
Wait, can you still do that in Minecraft? I'm not actually sure. I've not played Minecraft in a long time. This is an amateur rant on Newtonian mechanics, aren't it? Wait. Hi, Ren. How you doing? Tom, have you made a video game before? Because I have a feeling you haven't made a video game before.
All of that's working fine. But now they'll walk to the top of a slope but not walk down it. That's weird. What's going on with that? The raycasts that are trying to detect ground collision to see if there's still ground for them to walk on or if it's a ledge and they need to turn around, those aren't long enough to actually touch the slope if the slope is steep enough. So some slopes, they'll get to it, they'll see what they think is a hole in the ground, they won't walk down the slope. So we can account for this by either extending the raycast for the ground collision, but that could potentially see a tile that they would walk off a ledge onto another tile. So instead, we have a secondary raycast that we can use to check, is there a slope there? Because if we don't see any ground but we see a slope, we know that we can continue walking. So that's good. But now the enemies are walking up to the bottom of the slope but won't walk up it. So what's going on with that? We have a raycast that shoots out in front of the enemy to see if they see a wall. And if they see a wall, they turn around. The problem is that the slope, if the slope is steep enough, they will see it, and they will see that there is collision in the way and turn around. Okay, we can account for this too. When we shoot out that raycast to see if there's a wall, we get the normal vector of whatever we collide with and check and make sure that it's 90 degrees or it's like close to it, some offset, some value that determines what gradation of slope we're okay with walking up. We check that normal value, make sure it's acceptable. If it is acceptable, it's a slope and we can walk up it. Otherwise, it's a wall, we turn around. Do you see the problem? These engines and these features and all this stuff is made so much more complicated by using slopes.
This makes me so glad that Social Distance is a UI game and don't worry about slopes. Here's how you fix it. Just don't have slopes. Just remove them. just don't do it. Everything is either horizontal or vertical. No in between.
If it was all flat ground and flat walls, everything would be very simple. Everything would work no problem. But the slopes introduce so many other issues that you have to solve, where it's just physics problem after physics problem after physics problem. And the more problems you solve, the more pop up. It's like, I thought I had the enemy physics working with slopes perfectly, and then Runtunk, do this. Thanks, bud. And that's just the player and the enemies. That's not even considering the projectile physics and how they interact with slopes. It's nonstop, the amount of physics issues that pop up when you're using slopes. So if you don't use slopes, you don't have to deal with any of that. And I think that alone is enough for most game devs to be like, not worth it. I don't want to put all that extra time into handling slopes, especially when you're doing something.
I guess I've not looked into like what's available for Godot or Unity, but I imagine there's a lot of I would imagine there's a lot of like player controllers that are made to solve this problem already. Like it would seem weird to me that there wouldn't be player controllers you can just download that do a lot of the things you want. Obviously, if you want it to be working exactly the way you want as a player controller, that'll be different, and you might have to rewrite some of the stuff yourself. But at least for basic stuff, I assume most solutions probably have flaws with edge cases. Oh, no doubt. But I know Unity has like a lot of stuff available for it already, and Godot has some like third-party stores as well. So I'm sure there's probably something out there. Surely.
And by yourself. If you're solo deving a project, there are so many things you need to deal with and so much stuff that you have to do that spending that extra time making slope physics work doesn't feel like the best use of your resources, if you know what I'm saying. But that alone wouldn't be enough to stop me. I mean, I already solved most of the physics issues that have popped up, and I would be willing to continue solving all the physics issues that pop up just so I can have my beautiful, delicious little baby slopes in the game. But there's more issues. So let's get on to number 2, art. Now, let's do a little demonstration. Take a look at Isadora standing on some flat ground. Right. Nice, right? Beautiful. Perfect.
Right.
No issues. Looks great. I love the idle animation. Awesome. Now, let's look at Isadora standing on a slope. I think the issue is fairly obvious. Isadora, BB, what that foot doing? Your instinct when seeing that might be, oh, you need some kind of special animation for when she's idling on a slope. This one has her legs spread out very far, which makes sense for flat ground. You know, you got to keep that battle stance. But when you're on a slope, she should maybe have her feet pushed closer together so you don't have that issue. What about her standing attacks, right? When she's not running, should those have a special sloped version? Not to mention, running up and down the slope also looks a little off. It's not as bad. Like, you can buy it, but you could have a better animation for running up a slope where she gets like a little bit...
Just be lazy and rotate it by the angle of the slope. Every time that I've dealt with slopes, whenever I've like messed around with doing game development, I've taken the laziest possible approach to it. It's not a good approach at all, and there are much better ways to do it, but it will work.
More vertical movement on the knees. So are we just gonna have an entire separate suite of animations to use when we're on the slope, and then we have to be very careful when we're playing the animation?
Has Godot gotten any better with accessibility? What problems existed already? If you do on purpose do a trash game, that would be the ideal.
To make sure we're blending between them correctly. Is that the answer? Because, I mean, we could do that. It is more, expensive in terms of time and effort of making all those animations and getting them all in and working. But it doesn't really solve the problem, because what about enemies? Let's do the worst example we have, Runktonk. Runktonk is an amazing enemy with a fantastic walk cycle. I mean, look.
That is a really cool looking enemy.
Look at him moving on some flat ground. It's beautiful. But Runktonk is very, very wide. And being wider makes this problem more obvious, as you will soon see. So let's see Runktonk walking up a slope and walking down a slope. Let's watch Runktonk walk up this slope.
Yeah.
And now we can watch Runktonk walk down the slope. He barely looks like he's even on the ground. It's hilarious. He's not even related to the ground. It looks like he just kind of floats up next to it. Now, there are some small tweaks we could do here to get it looking better, like changing his collision and changing the way the Z indices work up and maybe hiding. Like, there are some little tweaks we could do, but they don't solve the core issue. The core issue here is that there isn't any perspective to these tiles, so it doesn't look right. So the solution...
Now that I think about it, looking at some of the indie games that I played at AvCon, of the 2D games, I don't think I played any of them that have slopes. Like, there's a bunch of platformers I played, no slopes. There's a bunch of action games I played, no slopes. Obviously, fighting games generally don't have slopes. I don't think I played a single game at AvCon that's a 2D game that had slopes.
Is to use perspective. Now, perspective is like a different type of tile set. Let's use some concrete examples so you can see what I mean. Hollow Knight is a game that does not have any perspective on the tiles. They are like full, flat, face on. You are seeing the tile, and Hollow Knight stands directly on top of the tile, like literally at the very tippy top. Whereas if you look in Mega Man X4, this has perspective on the tile. You're not seeing the top of the tile from front face, where you only see like the very like tippy top line. You're actually seeing the top of the tile from a perspective view above it, so you see like more of it. It goes deeper in. Like, let's put Hollow Knight on like one side and Mega Man X4 on the other side. and you can see Hollow Knight stands on top of the tile, the very top line, and it's like a front-facing view. Whereas in Mega Man X4, he's standing on the top of the tile, but like in the middle of the top of the tile, and you get to see like an extended view of it into the Z index because of perspective. That's the key phrase to take away there. Z index. The tiles move back into the Z index, and you get to see that because of the perspective. Actually, now that I think about it, I saw a really helpful guide on Twitter. I'll go find that and make sure it's in post here. So check out this very useful guide. You can see the different ways that a tile set can be viewed. Hollow Knight is one called jutting floor, whereas Mega Man X4 and what I would need to support the Z indexing is something like perspective or fake perspective. The problem with perspective is that the extreme angles don't support wall climbing because you can only climb the wall from one side of it. The other side, you would be hidden behind the wall. Now, you could still do that, but it would look funky. So I could use fake perspective, which solves that problem, but it introduces a new problem, which is that it looks freaking weird. Fake perspective just looks strange. We could do what Mega Man still do that, but it would look funky. So I could use
fake. That looks terrible. Frankly, like I don't think I've ever played a single game that has perspective done like this. And if I did, I would just think it looks like this doesn't look like perspective to me. This just looks like a triangle. The Dead Cells devs were daring enough to add slopes in the game specifically because of the Castlevania DLC.
Perspective, which solves that problem, but it introduces a new problem, which is that it looks
probably more popular in very old games. I see.
Weird. Fake perspective just looks strange. We could do what Mega Man X4 does, which is use a perspective view, but the angles are like directly straight into the Z index, right? There is no perspective skew at all. It's just straight into the Z index. And all of these are like possible. We could do this to solve the issue, but it is more complicated to do this rather than doing like the front facade or like the jutting floor versions of tile sets. It's harder, it's more work, and it limits what you can do artistically. I have had difficulties with using tile sets because of this Z index constraint that's introduced by slopes, and I've been talking to some environment artists that have said the same thing. I was like, we really need this Z index so that we can support slopes, and they said, do you really need the slopes? Because the Z index thing is hard. So essentially, wanting to support slopes requires you to have this deep Z index so that things look right, and that deep Z index introduces a lot of constraints around the art of the game. If you have a particular look you're going for that doesn't include this perspective thing, just don't use slopes. It'll look weird unless you have unless you're willing to do a bunch of other animation work. It just increases the workload on the art side by quite a lot. By itself, may be worth it if you really like slopes, but the increased workload from the art and animation side, plus the increased workload from the physics side, and suddenly with the increased workload here, you're starting to see why it just doesn't make sense from a workflow perspective to want.
Well, the other thing he didn't bring up with physics is if you have movable objects in your game, and if you like, say you have like a ball or something, now you have to account for slopes with your movement of that as well, and that just becomes a whole nother nightmare unto itself, where now you have to worry about like, okay, a ball rolls up a hill, but how far should it roll up the hill? At what point should it start coming back? And now you're basically just re-implementing a fucking physics engine. And now you're having a nightmare. Puzzle game where you push boxes across a floor. Great example. Yeah, should the boxes interact with slopes? Or should they just sit there as static objects? And when they hit a ledge, at what point should they slide down to like land on the ledge? Because you don't want to have it like jutting out the entire way. Why slopes are shockingly difficult for quadruple A game devs. Well, lots of things are difficult for quadruple A game devs.
To use slopes, you save so much time and effort that you can dedicate to other way more important things. But I gotta tell you, I was holding fast. I was headstrong and moving forward with my slopes. I didn't care about any of this. I was like, yeah, we got slopes.
Yeah.
Until I ran into problem number 3. And problem number 3 is level design.
Right.
A quick interruption to let you know that Isadora's Edge is now...
Also another fun thing that slopes introduced, possibility of concave geometry. The hardest part for quadruple A is making a halfway decent game. Counting is difficult for quadruple A game devs because they don't realize they're just half A game devs.
Live on Steam, so if you want to wishlist the game, the link will be in the description and the pinned top comment. So
again, I will share the link. So if you want to do that, if you want to get the game, there you go. Grab the game or go wishlist the game. It looks really cool. yeah, I might check it out myself.
Head on over there and give it a wish list if you're feeling up to it. I'll make like a full announcement video and talk about the details of it later, but it just went live, so I decided to record this and get it in before the next video goes out. All right, back to the video. So I've been working on the level design for the Corrupted Forest level in my game quite a bit recently. Maybe I'll show you some like test footage. I've been using like gray boxes. Well,
it has.
I mean, I think yes,
has that wall climbing
blue boxes just to prototype gameplay without focusing on the art of it. And the issue I was running into is that slopes can really trivialize sections because it gets rid of ledge guarding. Now, if you've ever played Smash Brothers or you're familiar with that, then ledge guarding makes perfect sense to you. Don't even need any more explanation.
I have literally no idea what the fuck is a ledge guard.
In case you don't, there's a ledge, right? And there's an enemy on the ledge. You have to jump to get up onto that ledge. You can't just like be there now. And that means the enemy on the ledge has a lot of power over you. You can't just like recklessly go up there. You have to engage from below. And being below the enemy, especially if they have projectiles or other ways to guard the ledge, puts you at a huge disadvantage. So it can add some challenge. It allows for some interesting game design. Slopes eliminate that. It means you can just walk up to the enemy that is elevated above you. It means that an elevation change isn't inherently an advantage or a disadvantage. Now, you could say, just don't add the slope there then, right? If you want the challenge of the enemy guarding the ledge, make it be a ledge, don't add a slope. Okay, so we've eliminated one use case of slopes, right? So what if we just want a change in gradation? We want to increase or decrease our elevation. We would be able to use a slope here because we don't care about there being a challenge. It's fine. Well, then you also don't need a slope. Just don't put a challenge there. Just make it a jump or whatever, and just don't have a slope. Then there's still no challenge, and you're still changing your verticality, right? So we don't really have that use for it either. And this was the issue Well,
going back to what he said before, he just likes slopes. So I guess there is still that use case there.
Kept running into over and over again. Anytime I tried to use a slope during level design, I was like, there is no point to having this here. Either it is invalidating challenges or it isn't adding anything. It actually came to a head, most obviously, when I finally found a use case for a slope. I prototyped some traps in the level that have like a laser, and if you trip the laser, it shoots you. You know, it's a tripwire. I wasn't sure if it fit the forest, but I was just prototyping and playtesting mechanics, you know, as one does. It worked pretty well. Maybe I can throw the footage up here of me like playtesting with the slopes there. And I was like, aha, perfect. I'm so glad I have slopes in this game because this one obstacle in this one room type is a little bit easier to make thanks to the slopes. And that gave me a sort of realization that maybe, actually, I don't need the slopes. If it was this difficult to find a use case for them, there are plenty of other room types I could make. Essentially, the issue I have with slopes when it comes to level design, it's not a tool that's really helping me very much. It's not unlocking new cool design space for me to use. It's just something that's there, so I put slopes in. And
right, so it's like, there's like one or two different things he could use them for, but at least for his kind of game. Obviously, different kinds of game, like if you're a puzzle game, for example, you might have a bunch of different use cases for it, but for an action game like this, it's not adding much for how much it costs to do. Or, yeah, okay, Sonic's also a good example. Yeah, Sonic without slopes would be an awful game, right? Like, the whole cool thing about Sonic is that you can run around the slopes, and the slopes go upside down. Right, Sonic is a very good example there, but this game is not that.
And sometimes I have to go delete them because it's invalidating a challenge. For the most part, slopes are in there purely aesthetically. They are not functionally serving any level design purpose. I'm deleting a lot of them to make the level design harder. And, not to mention, you would think, right, intuitively, that having more options available makes level design easier, but...
And in Sonic, they don't really serve, like, having the loops don't really serve a purpose either, but they just look cool, right? Like, not everything needs to serve a purpose. Sometimes you can just have it in the game because it's cool, because you just want it to be there, because it's just awesome. Like, it's a video game, right? You can do things you can't do in real life. You can run upside down. But, you know, if you're one person, there's only certain things you can do. And going back to what he was saying about physics and art, I can see why that would be a reason to avoid doing that.
I find
Sonic
a lot of the
just be
time
Mario.
that it's constraints that breed creativity. It's like having some defined boundaries for your problem space to make it easier to come up with a solution to that problem. And so giving myself less tools for building the levels actually gives me more ideas because I have to creatively use the tools I do have. And slopes were not really assisting me at all. So ultimately I had to ask myself, are having slopes available to me while building these levels making things easier or harder? And the answer, shockingly to me, was harder. So they weren't helping me build levels like I thought they would. They were causing me to do a bunch of extra programming and development to handle all the physics issues. And they were making things take longer and be more extra programming and development to handle all the physics issues.
You know, he fucked up the editing right there. He grayed out the wrong one.
And they were making things take longer and be more difficult artistically. And for what benefit? So that you can go like this? Whee! And yeah, sure, I'm oversimplifying saying that's all you get from it is the ability to go wee up a slope. But honestly, that's more or less what it is. Like, the one use case I can really think of is in Symphony of the Night, where there's like that big staircase, and there are enemies that have like a horizontal threat range, and they're like above you vertically, and you get to like engage them. But I don't know why I couldn't just build that with ledges also. Ultimately, the benefit of slopes is that you get to have slopes. And the cons are that it's way more work. And
going wee is very important. I was
doing all this extra work to make sure slopes were functional and available and looked artistically correct. And I was needing to go out of my way to try to figure out ways that I could still incorporate them. And it's like, why am I doing all this extra work to give myself extra work when I can make fun levels without slopes? They are not necessary. Hollow Knight is an incredible game, and spoiler alert, it don't got no slopes in it. So Hollow Knight is an incredible game, and spoiler alert, it don't got...
Is that not... Wait. Is that not a... Wait. Does that not behave like a slope? Or is that like a solid... You can't walk any further. I don't remember. Slopium. Sloppium. Sloppium. Sloppium would be... that would be a very different, that would be a very different thing. It doesn't behave like a slope. You can't walk up this. It's been a bit since I played, Hollow Knight. I want to use this guy in the YouTube poop for some reason. He's got that energy, doesn't he?
No slopes in it. So that's what I'm saying. If you...
Like, don't be mean. Like, I like this guy. He's got a lot of energy. He's like, clearly very passionate about his game. Like, these are the kinds of people that I really love. Like, these are the people who really make cool games. People who just want, like, they just love video games. They just want to make something cool. And yeah, maybe he's a little bit cringe. Yeah, sure. But like, that's how you get something fun, right? Right? Like,
really love slopes.
You know what I'm saying.
You have a use case that makes slopes important. You have some main mechanic of your game that you need to slide down slopes or slide up slopes or something. If slopes are a core part of your game, or you just really don't care about all the extra work, you love them that much, sure, go ahead, put slopes in your game. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not your dad. I couldn't stop you if I wanted to. But if you don't have a strong feeling about slopes, or they aren't necessary, they aren't like a core necessity for your gameplay, cut them. And coming from me, that's like really hard to say because boy, I love slopes. I have thought maybe I should cut slopes. No, never doing it so many times while working on this game. But ultimately, the answer I think is just that they're not worth it. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment telling me how awesome this video was and how I've completely blown your mind about how slopes work. Yeah, I'm supposed... What am I supposed to say? Like, subscribing is free? That's one of the things I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to say only one person that out of every bajillion that watched this video is actually subscribed. Like,
I think my rate's like... I think 60% are unsubscribed. Something like that.
1.3% of people that watch my videos are subscribed. If you liked the video, it would really mean a lot to me if you press subscribe, if you hit like, if you left a comment.
Again, this is my old really channel. I will sub on my main channel.
Appreciate you sticking around and watching the whole thing. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
That was a good video. Yeah, that was a good video. Hope you found my suggested video interesting. Yeah, no, that was a really good video. I have wanted to start messing around more with, like, there's a lot. Okay, right. Let me explain something. Okay, there is a lot of things that I would like to do. Okay, there's a lot. I would like to write more Rust code. I'd like to write more. I'd like to start doing some Godot stuff. But then I turn my computer on, and then I open up Path of Exile. And then we don't do any of that. then I start fucking I start grinding out Harvest, and we don't do any of that. I feel that, man. Yeah. Here's what I'll say. After this league, maybe after this league I do more, but I don't know. Instructions unclear, wrote slopes and social distance shell scripting language. Oh god. So, Richie, do you have anything to add to the slope situation that he didn't cover in his video? Maybe like something that was specific to the use case that Trixel had, or did he pretty much cover... Because I knew you guys are like, obviously it was like a very different kind of game. So I don't know if there was like some specific edge case that was not relevant for what he was talking about. Surely Brodie will finally be productive after the current league. I was more productive in the last league because the last league was shit. But I haven't quit this league yet, so we're not productive at this point. Subscribe to Brodie or you're forced to play games on Linux. Yeah, absolutely. No one wants to play games on Linux. Actually, I wonder, is he planning to release a Linux version? No. Okay, at least not at this point. One edge case I can think of is handling things like crawling. Oh, and swinging. What's special about swinging? Is that like momentum, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the swinging case would be here. Like what the issue with swinging would be. I'm not sure the specifics left before I could test, but I run PoE on Linux. It's good. I do as well. That's my problem. That's the problem. Anything ranged would behave weirdly with slopes. Yeah, like if any like projectiles, like if you're gonna have a projectile-based weapon, you either have to have it go up the slope or stop at the start of the slope, and then if you do that, then projectile weapons are completely useless. But that's fine if that's the way you want it to work. I guess it could work like that. I'd imagine the issue with swinging would have been the fact that you have to worry about the player colliding with the slope. The player still has physics when you swing, but the game code is handling them rather than Unity's physics engine. I'm not... What about the player colliding with the slope? Like when you land? In Mega Man games, there were spike ball enemies that bounced around. They were often placed in sloped areas. Yeah, but you're also not an indie game studio if you're making Mega Man. So it's a very very different situation. You have the resources to fix these problems. At least I hope you do. Either when you land or just smack into the side of an object while swinging. I see.